Yeah, we are live. 4 minutes till. No, keep inching away at it, trying to make up for the other times when I'm not on time. Hope you guys are all doing good. Wednesday night, hump day. Tonight we're going to talk about the video that I just posted up, and one that I'm working on now is all about torque production. So we took a look. If you haven't taken a look take a look at the video that's up now, and that's all about a comparison between a 6-liter LS, kind of when it was introduced anyway, the big motor for the LS family. And yes, I know there's a 7-liter, but you're not going to find that in a truck. And then later on, they would introduce the 6.2 stuff, and arguably that works even better. But the comparison is between a 6-liter LS and a Gen 6 454, technically speaking, an L29, and that is also a EFI fuel injected, and it was the upgrade version from the previous generation. 454 was the throttle body injected version, and then they upgraded with individual ports, individual port injection, and a long runner manifold that had better heads. It didn't have the peanut ports. It had conventional rectangular port heads, very small chambers, 102 cc's. So, and it was a factory hydraulic roller cam where the others were flat tappet. So it was in terms of upgrades, there was a pretty significant upgrade and a pretty significant change in power from around 255-ish to 290 or something like that. So it was a pretty big jump. The nice thing about, and if you take a look at the video, you'll see the nice thing about having any 454 is that if you only have 364 inches like the 6-liter, and now you have 454 inches, it just translates immediately into torque. I mean, you don't even have to have, in terms of specific output, the LS is better. It's a better motor. It makes, I mean, the thing made 405 horsepower and 400 and I don't know, 20 or 30 or something like that foot-pounds of torque. So it did very well. And certainly makes more power than the big block does, especially out at the top. For a lot of the RPM range, I think above 42 or 4,300 RPM. But the thing is, for a lot of guys, the towing guys and stuff, they look at the first part of the curve below 4,000 from idle, although you're never at wide open throttle at idle, but from 1,000 RPM or 1,500 RPM or something like that up to, in that range where we're using it. And it's kind of nice when you're actually behind the wheel and driving something and towing something. I've towed a lot of stuff with my little 1500. We had a boat and things, and we towed with it. And it's kind of nice to not have the transmission have to kick down when you're going up a grade or something like that. And if you could just press on the gas a little bit more, and there's extra torque there without the downshift, it's kind of nice. But that kind of brings us up to the question that I have for tonight. We know from the video, and I'm sure all of you guys have watched this by now. If you haven't, you should be doing a dual screen and watching it as we talk, because we will be more than 10 minutes in our discussion. But not surprisingly, the bigger motor makes more torque down low. I included the 4.8 and the 5.3 and the 6.0 just to show that as we go up in displacement, we go up in low speed torque production. In this case, we go up in power basically everywhere on the jumping from the LS stuff, but on the big block, because it becomes less efficient out at higher engine speeds, not because of the heads actually have a lot more flow to offer, but it has a very mild cam and it has a fairly long runner EFI intake manifold. And so it's designed to make power at a fairly low engine speed and then not designed to rev. The LS is, as we said, works over a broader range, doesn't have the torque that the 454 does, especially down low. It's not even close, but it does have, good power production through the whole RPM range. But going from a 4.8 to a 5.3 to a 6.0 in stock trim has predictable results. We make a lot more torque, but we make a lot more of everything. And so bigger is better in those cases, and it works out exactly like that. Excuse me. But my question for tonight is that the end of judging by the comments, the answer is no. Is that the end of the discussion? We know from running something on the engine dyno that when we show this and a bigger motor makes more power, it's not earth shattering. We're not telling you something that most people, especially guys in this chat, don't already know. But the question is that the whole story when you're in the vehicle? Because if you drive a new modern vehicle, an LS, an LT, especially now, with the 25-speed transmissions that they have, you're always kind of in the right gear. So you can put the motor in the RPM range where it's very effective. And that's why they do lots of gear splits like that, because and especially if you're accelerating and keep it in the sweet spot, you can optimize the acceleration of that particular motor by having it only run, in a narrow range. That's what CVT transmissions do. They keep it in an optimum range, and having multiple gears does the same kind of thing. If you compare that to back in the day when guys were running a 2-speed power glide, you had to have a pretty broad torque curve to be able to utilize that, because you ran for, in first gear, you ran for a lot of RPM, and then you shifted and you dropped way down, and then you had to run through another gear. But as you go up in the number of gears, you're just dropping down just a little bit, over and accelerating in a short range. So gearing, I think, and also rear end gearing. We know that for truck guys, especially when you order your truck it's a 4-wheel drive with a tow package, all that stuff, oftentimes it will come with a change in rear gears. You'll go from a 373 to a 410 or a 430 or whatever gearing they have available as the upgrade. As you do that, though, unfortunately, and this happens with a bigger motor as well, you tend to sacrifice fuel mileage, because as you go up in engine speed, typically you go down in fuel mileage. And that's kind of what happens. But gearing is obviously one alternative to displacement. The other thing we see, and I didn't really talk about this very much in the video, but there are other things that you can do. Variable cam timing is definitely beneficial. Different intake manifold designs and long tube headers and then those kinds of things all can make a minor difference. But one of the big things, obviously, and I have used this, I think I did this already in a video when I compared the 4.8 with the turbo and the 454, is we see that boost obviously is a replacement for displacement. So if we can, I don't know about, I'm not certain that it is in a towing and heavy duty truck kind of application. Like if I were towing something seriously heavy, I don't know that I would rely on a 4.8 with boost over a bigger motor. One of the things I would be concerned with in that application, not that it can't make the power, it can certainly make all the power that a naturally aspirated 454 can make. If you have a 4.8 or a 5.3 or a 6.0 with a bit of boost in it, because the nice thing is if you add 7 pounds of boost or 7.5 pounds of boost, you can then double the torque output. So doubling the torque output is a substantial increase. And when you go from a 4.8 or a 5.3 or a 6.0, especially from a 6.0 to a 7.4 liter, you're talking about a little bit of a gain in torque. You're not talking about doubling it. Even on the 4.8, you didn't double the torque output when you went to a 7.4 liter. So if you add boost and you can double the torque output, that's a fairly stout kind of deal. And especially at a fairly low boost level, it works very well. The thing that I would be concerned with doing stuff like that is the rest of your combination has to be able to cope with that. So your transmission, particularly your converter and the heat that's generated and stuff, all of that stuff you have to be able to manage that. The other thing that's super critical, and much more so than on a big block that's just kind of loafing around and making the torque output that it's making, because let's face it, that's not a very high specific torque output for a 7.4 liter 454. Certainly not a high specific power output by any means. It's not anywhere near even 1 horsepower per cubic inch. So, and it's not, it's a far cry from 100 horsepower per liter, which we would like to have from, with all of our race motors. So it's nowhere near that. But so it's life is easy and it's fairly low compression. And all of that works out fairly well for towing when you're lugging up a hill and the thing is struggling to get up the hill and it's loaded and it's hot and all that. And that's the thing that I would be concerned with on a turbo 4.8 or 5.3, or not so much a 6.0, because it's pretty easy to get really big, some fairly big torque numbers with some fairly low boost. But the critical element would be tuning. So you'd need to make sure that at any kind of load and throttle angle and boost level that you have, particularly the timing, the airfield, I think, would be fairly easy to get. You'd want that thing to be in the low 11s more than likely. A lot of times even on the NA stuff from the factory, it could go into the 10s. They want the thing to be super safe and not hurt itself. And then you could go into sometimes on some of the factory boosted stuff, I've seen applications where they go into down low with boost. They go into single digit timing levels. I would be worried about EGTs on something like that, but you're not supposed to be taking a Shelby GT500 and running it at full throttle at 1,000 RPM going up a steep grade, and certainly not pulling a trailer, obviously. So you shouldn't be doing that. You should know how to shift and make that happen already. So the tune would be critical on that. And I know I've had people comment and tell me, because I've asked this question before, are there guys out running LSs with turbos that are using them like as actual tow vehicles? I'm not talking about something that you tow your bass boat over with that you race around that weighs next to nothing. I'm talking about something where you tow with it, like you're towing a big cabin cruiser or a fifth wheel or something like that. Are people really using it for that, or is that relegated to just diesel turbo stuff when you're really wanting to have some hefty stuff that you got to pull around? For us, making the power on the dyno, whether it's a 454 or a 6-liter or even a 4.8, making the power is easy, but getting that working and managed and being able to go out and come back and not break down and not overheat and not detonate itself to death. That's why when you see an OEM application where they have forced induction in a truck, or even a big motor like a 454 in a truck, they know that people are going to be doing stuff like that, and they know that if they have a load capacity or a GVW or a towing rating, they know that people are going to exceed that by and a lot of times not by a little bit, by like a dramatic amount. So they're sitting over there, oh yeah, we're going to rate this that you can tow 10,000 pounds with this, and they're just laughing, knowing, okay, that means 20 or 25 or whatever the number is that the guy can actually like physically load onto there, because that's what people do. And unfortunately, the OEMs have to make it so that when they give a rating like that and they tune it, accordingly, that they know that it's going to be abused way beyond that. So let me know what you guys think about the other things that can affect, the 6-liter versus the 454 is fairly obvious, but in terms of low speed power below 4,000 RPM, the bigger motor makes more torque. And we'll see some more of that when I do the stroker things in part 2, which will be interesting. But does the gearing change that? Are there other things, other mods that we would do that would change that? Does rear end gearing and trans gearing? Does and also boost? Are there guys out there that are running boosted applications and actually towing with them? And I'm not talking about an OEM application, because like the V6 twin turbo deals that Ford has, and GM probably has them too. I know that they have a 4-cylinder version, but I know that guys are using those. I'm talking about if a guy swaps an LS into a truck and he uses that for towing, and he's put his own turbo on there and done the tuning on it. Are there guys out there doing that stuff, that are doing it themselves and making that work? Because then that takes a really super good kind of tuner guy to understand what the needs are for that particular thing. So let me know if you guys have any of that, and then we'll get to our questions. Let's see, Zeke, what size headers would be best for a 6-liter with a healthy cam? Are you racing it, or are you just driving around? We don't see a big difference between an 1 3/4 set of headers and an 1 7/8. Sometimes the gain is in one spot and the other. You're not going to see a big peak power difference between those two. Robert wants to know who makes a 7-speed behind the 2.7-liter Edge ST. Casey, how about a 50-pound 24-inch flywheel? We saw an not alternate fuel. I don't know what the heck it would be called. We saw something like that had a big flywheel that they used stored energy in to drive the vehicle around. It was some sort of like research prototype or something that was at SEMA, and it was kind of cool, although it was really big, and if it got loose, it would be kind of scary, because this was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet in diameter. It was really big. Jeffrey, that's a good question. Other people have mentioned that too. I'm curious what would the numbers look like if you threw in numbers from the new 6.6 liter L8T. I haven't even seen what that thing's rated at, let alone run any of those on the dyno. Early on, way back a few years ago, I was talking to Brian Tooley about running one of those as a turbo deal on the dyno, because it should have made 1,000,000 horsepower. People have done it now, and I think have made 1,000,000 horsepower. So you're towing with your 2.3 liter turbo Saab. Nice. That's a perfect tow motor. Sounds great on boost at 4,500 RPM. Full boost, nice. Well, that's what boost is there for, right? It's there to be used. Jeffrey kind of wondering about a stroke 6 liter to 4.8. So it's apples for apples for apples and displacement versus the L8T. Turbo gas dualies usually have heat issues. That's why if and when I go for it, I'm going with the motor that's already E85 rated. That's probably a good idea to run the E85 in there. I know that when we were running our 454, it was carbureted. It was a 77. The exhaust manifolds, you could see when you're like going up a grade. I mean, they're glowing red hot. It was it's pretty fiery. Ginger Squatch, have you ever worked with anyone who's removed the swirl ramp from the D16Y8 head? No, I haven't. Travis, I have a 2500 Chevy 6 liter that like a turbo for towing. I'm just wondering about the 4L80. I think that the trans and converter will be okay. Obviously, they need to be cooled quite a bit. I don't know if the factory cooler is going to be enough. You might think about that. Any major difference in stroker kit options between the two platforms, like between for an LS and a big block? And they both increase displacement. Are you talking about like, is the quality any good, or what's really the question? Will you ever do straight six engines from BMW? I don't have a way to mount them or run them right now, but we are going to run. I have a RB25, and we have the Atlas 6-cylinder and a 292 Chevy. But I would like to run BMW stuff. I think it's cool. yeah, we got the it's not a Jed. When I was racing my 455, I was short shifting. That's probably good for that motor. It would still pull like a train. I was running mid-10s all motor. Nice. The 454 cheated with displacement. When you go to the wrecking yard, and you lift the hood, it just says motor. So you get that motor. And unfortunately for the 454, it's more expensive than the other motors that you get. Kyle, okay, you're looking for, I think if you're running, is that a street driven 7 liter? And what heads were on that? I think you might want to go with more of a split than that. Jeffrey, 400 horsepower and 460 foot-pounds. That's pretty stout. Does the L8T have variable cam timing also? Wolf's Blade, I don't know. I don't look at the Garrett site very often, but I need to look and see what they did to the GTX turbos. They went from 350 to 475. They had to change the wheel design, and I'm thinking it's a size. They had to change the size probably. Yeah, you do need to balance the trailer if you don't want the tail wagging the dog. That's for sure. I've seen those happen a couple of times. Guys with small mini trucks pulling full-size trailers with cars on the back of them. I'm like, yeah, you better be spot on, dude. My 95 Chevy Dually I'm trying to get running came factory with a 5.7 small block. I'm going to put 383 in it. That's good. Is it going to pull it around? A 90, I don't know what the weight is on a 95. I mean, obviously it would be better with a bigger motor. A 383 is certainly going to help. Yeah, that's the other thing that a lot of guys mentioned is obviously the 454 compared to an LS is going to be a lot heavier. Even an iron LS, the big block is definitely going to be heavier. Iron block, iron heads, lots of mass. The Saab turbo exhaust manifold glows bright red. Yeah, the turbo, it's not unusual for turbo manifolds to be like that. Good for burning the oil off. That's right. Get those plugs nice and clean. Larry's got a 96 Dodge 2500 8-liter V10 with a Garrett T51 plus a few other drivetrain mods, I would imagine. Tow with a few times. Nice. That should be a good combination. Can't wait to see the RB stuff. I know, me too. Still no J series. I was talking to my buddy Jimmy about J series. As a matter of fact, right before I got on here, I had the wiki page up on J series, so I'm getting J series prepped. Thoughts on a BTR stage 4 PDS cam for a 5th gen Z01 manual car, street strip ported blower and pulleyed? That would work good. All of the blower cams with a really wide LSA tend to lose power in the middle. You might have traction issues there anyway and not want more low speed power, but it will work. Atlas is the Trailblazer motor, yeah. They make it in a 4 and a 5 and a 6-cylinder version. I have the 6-cylinder version right now. Michael, you want to boost your BMW engine? Can't decide on a turbo or supercharger. An M90 is not going to feed very much BMW motor, so I asked Ginger Squatch. I asked because I'm in the process of doing so for my D16Y78 Mini Me swap for my turbo build for higher compression for additional output at low RPM. I'm not familiar with the single cams that I ran. All of that stuff came later after I stopped doing the D16 stuff. So I'd have to look and see what that is. I'd have to look and see what it does have a swirl vane or something in it. VVT, you think so on the L8T? Have you ever heard of reinforcing the head bolt pillars? I've heard that on other engines, but I don't know about the D16. Again, that's not something that I've done. Kyle, you have Trickflow 235s. Going to be a Texas Speed Race lead. 4125 bore, 4-inch stroke. Should have cam more. Yeah, it should. If you want to run that RPM range, I'd be surprised if it's not going to make power anywhere near 82 or 7200 with that camshaft. But it needs more exhaust duration to rev. If you want it will make more power at a higher engine speed if you put more exhaust duration in it. Plus, it'll sound cool. If you want it to idle better, the narrow split that you have will work better. Todd, my late father told me that in the early 60s, they proved short strokes could gain RPM faster given engine size. So you're saying that something that has the same displacement and has a shorter stroke, I don't know what you mean by I hear people say stuff like this, but I don't know what you mean by it gains RPM faster. Are you talking about on a free rev, or are you talking about it accelerates faster, it makes more power? How do we measure what you're talking about? If it's just a free rev, that's not going to be a function of bore and stroke. That's going to be a function of other things. The power production is going to be a function primarily of displacement, and then bore and stroke only if you can take advantage of, if the change in bore allows you to take advantage of improved head flow because of valve unshrouding and things like that. So that's that. So Ron, the fuel mileage was not good in the L8T, huh? That's a direct injected motor, right? I've never run any International Harvester motors. Steve needs advice on a camshaft for a 2016 Yukon Denali with a Whipple 2.9 blower. That's an LT motor, right? You want to talk to the guys at Brian Tooley. Kyle, 24 to 7,200 RPM range in the 446. The J series will be cool. I'm just trying to figure out which one I want to get, or I need to look at availability first, but I want to go in knowing kind of what year and make and model kind of thing I want. I can't talk torque without talking about a Buick. I think that the Cadillac guys would step in and want some of that. So trade the M90 for a turbo. I think you'll be better off. I think the most BMWs, unless you're talking about a 4-cylinder version, any of the 6-cylinder versions are going to be fairly efficient motors already, and so they're gonna want more than that M90 probably can do. And if you spin it way up like guys do with a 2.5-inch blower pulley, it's just not going to be terribly efficient there. Whereas a turbo will be very efficient and be able to support lots more power. An International Harvester 348 to 392 weighs 800 pounds. That seems like a lot. This is the kind of stuff these are the kind of comments that interest me, that some people take as gospel for something that we're talking about, rather than it just being a specific thing between two cars. And Mike's awesome. I roll raced a 454 LS6 El Camino, which should have a lot of traction problems, with my 68 Firebird of 396, and the LS6 took forever to catch me. So a lot of things going on there. One that has nothing to do with bore versus stroke that people are talking about. Two, it also has nothing to do with a 454 versus a 396, because we don't know what the vehicle weights are. We don't know what the tune of the motors are. If the tune is the same, a 454 beats a 396 every time, because it makes more power everywhere than the smaller motor does. So if you ask somebody if they would rather have, in a class race, if they would rather have a 396 or a 454, everybody picks the bigger motor. Nobody picks the little motor, because you wouldn't, because it makes less power everywhere. Your 396 in the Firebird may have been better than the 454 that was in the Chevelle, or he might not have been able to put traction down. He might not have been able to drive. There are a lot of things that go in there that are not the same as like a back-to-back test that's run on the dyno. But unfortunately, Mike, as I'm sure you've heard before, guys tend to believe that, oh, my DZ302 rev to 9. I get that all the time whenever I post a DZ302 thing. My DZ302 ran to 9,600 all the time. No, it didn't. No factory DZ302 ever ran to 9,600. Maybe as a free rev and then broke. They would not do that. That was all myth. Robzilla, is there a rule of thumb when choosing to run more RPM, how much would be too much? I don't know. Maybe I don't understand the question. Like how much more engine speed? Your engine speed that you're running should be dictated by your power curve. So you don't need to keep, if you're on the way downside of the curve, there's no reason for you to keep running more engine speed. Guys run engine speed when they're drag racing, and you basically lop off the top of your power curve. And so you shift so that you make the most average power production with the peak. So on the front side and on the back side of that, sometimes revving it out beyond that can help, depending on the gearing and tire size and where you're ending up in your mile an hour and all that. You could go through all that. But typically, the best acceleration is going to come from having the best average power production. I have a Mark IV 4-bolt main, 454, 427 block, 427 crank. Okay, that's good. Yeah, Randall, get on those guys. Tell them, you guys better get that click rate up. Short stroke revs faster. I don't know what that means. Have you ever done one of these for a Magnum versus an LA? No, unfortunately, I haven't run enough Mopar stuff. I only have the one Magnum that I've run in stock trim, and I have the one 360 LA motor that I did out of my van. And I don't know what comparison those are. I don't think it's much of a comparison. Michael, I like to hear it. You click the like button. See, he wants to be here. He cares. Keto, your pull drift 454 part, 425 bore. Okay, it's a standard bore. Wow. 4-inch stroke. After putting the 305 heads on, it'll be 10.6. You can run 2 GT45 turbos. You're just gonna have enough octane and an intercooler and stuff. So Ginger, it has a swirl ramp inside the port. Okay. What they're trying to do is promote mixture motion, which Honda's very good at. Kyle, the cam will work fine. I'm just giving you options if you want something more or something different. That I'm just telling you how to get it. I'm not telling you should do it. Just if you did. Hydrazine, that's probably not good. Is that why people like putting the K20 head on the K24 block because it unshrouds the valves? I don't think that it does. I think that they have the same chamber size and the same valve size, right? One of my favorite tow rigs was a 1970 Chevy K10 with a 400 small block. The 400 small block was pretty good. My buddy had one in a station wagon. They were pretty torquey. Henry Ford said you can't balance a straight six. Traction at a roll. My dad had an El Camino, a 4-speed big block El Camino, so it lost traction even at 50 or 60 miles an hour. Michael, it's a 3-liter 6-cylinder BMW. Okay, cool. But that thing still makes like 240 horsepower NA, right? Short stroke motors react faster. That's like it hits the converter harder. That's like, it sounds like, what's his name? 454 also makes the magic quarter ton of torque. When will you do more videos on upgrading the 455? Soon. Is there a formula for calculating torque figure? You mean just estimating it? Since it if you knew what the VE was, wouldn't you already know what the torque number is? Can an Olds 403 be built to compete with an LQ4 for under $3,000? I don't think so, because I don't think it has nearly enough cylinder head, and you're going to have to get a set of aftermarket aluminum heads, and that's going to hurt the budget, I would imagine. Todd, you should, if you have a 305 in there now, you should put a 350 or a 383 and not a 302. Cam is 333 lift. Is that 333 lobe lift then, I would imagine? 8 times 1.7, 566. Okay. When 115 is actually not as wide as I thought it would be for a stage 4. 12,000 RPM Nova. Am I going to put a rotary in there? For stroker comparison question earlier, I was trying to get an idea how many options there were for each. There's for LSs and for big blocks, there's like unlimited amounts of stroker combinations. For you can go from over 500 inches on the LS and over, I don't know how big you can make a big block with a standard bore spacing block, but 632s are done, I think, with tall deck stuff. I'm in the process of turning my 97 Civic Coupe into a street road racing course. Cool. A 70 LT1 would free rev to 9,000 many times. I'm sorry. The LT1 had an even smaller cam than the DZ302 did. Plus, it had more displacement. We know displacement doesn't rev. Olds 400 is a good case study of bore versus stroke. Early 400s were good, but they changed the bore and stroke for 68. Those later 400s weren't as good. But ask yourself, what else did they change? Did they change the head design? Did they change the port flow? Did they change the cam timing? We've tried to do bore and stroke tests many times, and Freiberger's done it, and Brulet's done it. And whenever they do it, if the displacement is the same, the power is nearly the same. I mean, there's not one that is head and shoulders above others until you get up into the rarefied air of, okay, if the bore is big, like on a pro stock motor where the bore is gigantic because all they want to do is get a bunch of flow in. They're not doing it because it revs quicker. They're doing it for airflow so they can make more power. And it's the same thing with Formula One motors and stuff. They could get a Formula One motor that runs to, you could pick your number, 12, 15, 18, 20,000 RPM. If they were doing that out of a 2-liter motor and they would allow them to make a 3-liter motor and allow them to run that RPM, their 3-liter motor would still run that RPM. They only do what they're allowed. And if you want where the big bore comes into play is when you want more airflow and the bore is holding you back. Sean, the torque cam is a 202, 202 duration, and it's low 500 lift. It's a BTR cam. It's up on their site. He sells it, and it works pretty good. The 1970 LT1 is maybe one of my favorite motors, only because I had a 70.5. It wasn't a Z28. I wish it was, but it's probably better that I didn't have that since that was my first car. Mine was a split bumper Rally Sport base motor, but I obviously did all of the reading, everything that I could on the Z28, and I've tested that motor many, many times. And it's a solid flat tappet cam, and especially a stock one with the valve spring that's in it won't go to 9,000 RPM. It won't do it. Jeffrey, I haven't done slant stick stuff yet. I tried to run one, but it ended up being hurt. We fixed it since then, so that will be going back on. Cattle truck, what cam can I use in a 2003 6-liter to boost torque? Where do you want the torque boost? Almost any cam that you put in there is actually going to boost the peak torque. Any cam you put in there is going to make more peak torque than the one that you have. But if you want that torque gain at 2,000 RPM, it's going to be very hard to get with a camshaft. If you want it at 3,000 or 4,000, it's a little easier. JB, good evening, Richard. Are the stock LS7 heads really known for dropping valves? I thought that it was something else. I thought that they dropped valve seats or something. Keto, it's a 4270. That would be odd. So it's 20 over. A 468 is going to be 4280. A heavy El Camino, a 1967 375 horse, 396 4-speed El Camino with 4 series gears in it is not heavy in the back. My buddy had a 400 small block that hop Coke can. You just had to use the bumper jack to be able to do it. So brass, LH6, 243 heads, 9.9 compression, flat tops, BTR truck Norris cam, Holley HP, 6-speed, looking to add a single turbo for 850 horsepower. All of that's fine. How do I calculate a correctly sized turbo? If you want 850 horsepower, you go over, you do a search online for anything that says S475, and that's the turbo you'll want. There are others, but that one will work, and it's inexpensive and easy to get, and lots of people have it. Or the VS Racing 7875 will also work. That's right in the wheelhouses, 850. Ginger, what was the deal with the oversized valves in the Corvette 350 heads that you could bolt onto the truck block and have gains? You got to be specific about the years that you're talking about. Do you have any experience of working on rotary engines? Only the outsides of them. I've never taken one apart. No, I haven't rebuilt one. I went to the, what the heck was the rotary shop? Really cool guy there. They were in Southern California. I'll try to remember the guy's name. And he walked me through. We were rebuilding one that we were putting back in my girlfriend's car at the time. I had done some testing on the chassis dyno. We had done a header and a carburetor, and we had done some fans. Like we put a one of the fixed blade fans on there and did some clutch fans and things, but not actually doing any porting. And we never did a turbo or anything on them. Dan, a 302 small block is definitely cool. How good are the 195cc Speedmaster heads? They're okay. You'll want to change most of the stuff in them, like the springs and stuff. Maybe the valves, maybe the guides, maybe the seats. Why would an El Camino get less traction than a Chevelle? What is the weight distribution for an El Camino, and then what is it for a Chevelle? Dan on YouTube is a 12,000 RPM Nova, 68 to 72, and it runs a 283. I'm sure it's a stock one, right? Have you ever tested a stock 2007 5.3 Impala SS intake? That's the LS4, right? I have not. Let's see. That was an interesting question on the LSA. I want to see about that one. Oh, there it is. I got to get down to the rest of the questions. But do you have rules of thumb for piston to valve clearance in regards to LSA and O50 duration on a not specifically with LSA? If you look at a typical cam for an LS motor with a 4.8 or 5.3, there's a little bit of difference depending on the stroke. But and obviously piston design, if it's a flat top versus a dish piston. But something in the low to mid 230 at 50 on the intake is going to be really tight. And then the more that you tighten up the LSA, the worse that's going to become. So that's my rule for that. Todd, Chevelle's head glass closer to the rear axle. Half-inch headsteads fix. I don't know what half-inch headsteads fix. I'm lost here. There might have been it. The rotor shop might have been in Anaheim or Santa Ana. I thought it was in Long Beach though. SoCal all rotary. I'll think of it. Gonna put a 5.3 and a 72 Chevelle. That'll be good. Oh, the North Star. Yeah, that's what it was. The North Star yanks the heads out of the block. That's what somebody was talking about. The truck with the vent heads was from the 80s. It could pull way more weight and run the gears faster than the original heads. There's 15-mile-an-hour difference. This all sounds like stories. Doug, they did when Chevy introduced the L98. Well, first they introduced the L98, and then they introduced the L98 with the aluminum heads on it. And because my 85 had iron heads on it, and then the 86s had aluminum heads in the convertibles, and then they had aluminum heads after that. You take those aluminum heads and put them on some of the smog stuff before that, because they had fairly small chambers. They were the first factory aluminum heads, and those would help, but not a lot. I mean, they were aluminum, but that's really all they had going for them. They weren't a whole bunch better than, I don't think they flowed a whole bunch better than not than a Fuelie head, and probably not a whole bunch more than even an 882 head, I wouldn't think. Michael, I love the 5-liter stuff you did back in the day. That was all Muscle Mustangs. As a matter of fact, I was on last night or the night before. Evan and Jim were here, but then I was also on Evan's deal. I checked in on his live feed. He had Campy in the house, and so we got to talk a little bit about the old days. Okay, what else we got going on? Fly cutting pistons, how much can I remove before I upset the engine balance? I wouldn't worry about the engine balance. You're removing the same amount from all the pistons. So we've never worried about that. You should be more concerned with how deep you're putting the notch in and getting, if you're near the edge, getting near a ringland, or getting through the dome too, if you're doing that. Have you tested coil unplug style ignitions versus distributor-based ignitions? We haven't seen a big change in power from that, as long as the distributor ignition is working correctly. Where you can get into trouble like that is with engine speed, because of the rise time of the coil. You don't have enough time for the thing to fully energize and supply enough voltage basically to the plug. And if that happens, then you can have misfire. But otherwise, it's not. We haven't seen big power changes from that kind of upgrade. What piston did you use in the Gen 5 big block? Which one? I put together a few of them. Oval ports are way behind the old square port heads. An 049, a ported 049 head is every bit as good and probably better than a factory rectangular port head was. And any of the aftermarket stuff is way better than both of those. Ginger, I don't know what your question is. Oh, TPI versus swirl heads. That would make sense. Northwest Indiana. Is it cold out there? JPL. Is it intercooler out there? Yep, 3,800 intercooler punts. Can a small turbo increase torque below 3,000 RPM? Yes, if you look at the factory stuff, they have turbos sized so they make peak torque at 1,800 RPM. So you can have it come on wherever you want, depending on how you size it. Obviously, the trade-off is that if it's all good down low, then it's not going to be as good on the top. Richard, 2 questions. TBI 454 Gen 5 with a carb. Okay, good. A thumper cam. Wow. Cam stop. What do you think torque would be? Is it a stock head and all that? And you need comp should have cam or spring recommendations for that head and for that cam. I don't know what the part number is for that particular application. And that's going to be a flat tappet cam, right? Andy, you've used the FR265s, which are great heads, did you have any piston to head clearance issues with the dome pistons? Yeah, a lot of times we have to massage the piston for AFR heads. It happens all the time. I'd like to see, I haven't seen anybody port the new Gen 6 heads. I'd like to see how well a ported version of the Gen 6 small chamber head, see if those can be made to flow like an 049 head. I think it would be interesting to see. Oh, 22 degrees. That's nice. Yes, Evan is awesome. Evan and Campy are both awesome. 3 degrees. Yeah, that's pretty chilly. Joe's waiting for a big block Ford 429 content. I really wanted to do I was trying very hard to find a set of super Cobra Jet heads so that I could build a super Cobra Jet replica out of the 429 that Mark Sanchez has there, but I can't find them. I can't even find regular Cobra Jet heads. Wheelbase Media, I watch your water methanol versus intercooler videos, and I have no idea what you would want water methanol over an intercooler. A lot of times they put it in because the intercooler doesn't fit, and so that works. A lot of guys are using just methanol and not water. The thing that I always worry about, and we've covered that many times, is I worry about distribution in long runner manifolds. So if you could port inject just methanol, that probably would work better. Although I will always try to run an intercooler. But like with the supercharged deal, the 3800, before JPL, who is loaning me his intercooler, before we have that, we had to have something. We wanted something to cool the charge. Now we were already using E85, but it's nice to not see 200, 300 degree charge temperatures when you're trying to run, lots of boost on those things. You use higher compression pistons on the Gen 5 with peanut port heads on the big block Chevy. We use the kind of piston that we normally use, which is a 18 to 22, depending on which manufacturer we get it from. Something in there, that sort of dome, so that we could get something in the 10 to 1-ish compression ratio on some of the bigger chamber heads, like a 119 to 121 or 2 cc's. Can you boost a stock block head LQ4? Yes. Yeah, you can even, you don't even, for 650 horsepower, you don't even really have to put a cam in it, although it will help because you'll be able to do it on a lot less boost. Mongoose, discuss port velocity and cam selection, LS3 versus 6-liter versus L92. There's nothing to discuss there. The same cam works on all of those. Just pick the cam that gives you the power curve that you want. It's not. I ran tests, and this is how I know that. I'm not just speculating. I've run tests where I've run a rectangular port head, an LS3 head, and a cathedral port head. Can't remember what that one was. I think it was might have been a 799. Could have been an aftermarket one also. I think it was a 799. So we ran both of those heads. And then we ran a cathedral port cam with lots of exhaustoration, or not as much exhaustoration, and then a rec port cam with lots of exhaustoration, and ran both cams and both heads. And both of the cams did the same thing on both of the heads. The one with more exhaustoration makes more power at the very, very top. Through most of the curve, the two cams were made identical power on both heads. So, and then the one with less exhaustoration made a little bit more power way down low. Same peak torque, same peak power. And in fact, through most of the curve, they were identical on both heads. So both cams work with both heads. So don't worry so much about rec port head and port velocity from big valves and big port designs and all that. That's not something you have to concern yourself with. Randall, if you tried oval port and rectangular port heads and you guys are running at 7,500, you need port volume that the oval port heads probably didn't give you, I would imagine. And ultimately, a ported set of rec port heads should flow more than a ported set of oval port heads, even an 049. A ported set of 219 heads or something like that should probably, a good one, I think, flow more than a ported oval port head on the big blocks. Joe, you have a set of Super Cobra Jet heads I can borrow? You're kidding me. I'm going to give you my email address right now. I would love to find out what the Super Cobra Jet version of the 429 actually made. And if I had the heads, we can get everything else. We can make the compression, we can get a camshaft, all of that stuff. Although if you had an intake manifold, that'd be awesome too. Pablo, your head porting video was super cool. Thanks. I hope to do more of that stuff. I think that that's pretty fun, especially after seeing the gains that we got on the 3800. Those heads should now be ported. So I'm looking forward to flowing them again. I didn't do it. I had them done. What are your thoughts on potential launch for the new GM double overcam flat plate and Crank V8? Well, you got to add boost, right? Or it already has a high enough specific output. So cattle truck and Pete, where are you getting? Are you actually scaling those cars so that you know what the front to rear weight distribution is? But even with those numbers, it's still heavily weighted in the front compared to the back. Do you ever build engines for customers? No, I do not. Has anyone mounted a carburetor on an M90? I've seen them on the internet, but I've never tried it. I would like to because I think it would be cool for charge cooling. Is there a modern day performance V6 from GM? Yeah, there is. There's an LT1 base that what is it, the LV3 or something, or the LU3 or something? Have you ever tried L31 Vortec heads on a 305? I have not. I don't know how much more the L31 head flows than what is the LO3 or what's the 305 version. And the thing is the motor, is the 305 that you have enough to use the extra head flow? Yeah, it would be cool to flow the head. That's right. I have a 2.3 liter interference engine. What is an interference engine? Yeah, the modern LT1 base V6 is a 300 horsepower V6, so it's pretty stout. Oh, the L30 is the, okay. Have you run the V6 for the heads? I have not. I haven't even seen them yet. I haven't flow tested them or anything. Kyle, just out of curiosity, would you test the motor someone built? That you'd have to take that up with Westech. So the L30 heads don't flow like the L31 heads? No, Austin, I understand what interference engine means. I just don't know what 2.3 liter motor you're talking about. I like that everybody's chiming in with what an interference engine is. I'm asking what engine it is. I need to know what 2.3 liter engine it is. We understand what interference is. Do you think a W91 code Vortec 4.3 liter will have a boost? I don't know what that code is. If you look on the channel, I have 4.3 liter videos that we ran under boost and they worked just fine. What kind of valve spring compressor tool did you use on the 3800 heads? We have the manual crank ones, and then it has an adjustable scissor in the front of it so that we can use it for, because we have the other ones that they're non-adjustable, but they're designed for big retainers. The one that has the little scissor deal on it works with the small retainers like an LS style. Patrick, if it's a 91, the all those 4.3 liters will take boost. Keto, I can't give you a parts list like that right off the top of my head. The airflow research heads are a good idea. Obviously, you're going to want head studs. 1,400 horsepower is going to be a lot if you're going to be using that a whole bunch with that block. Cyclops, I would pick though either a Buick 455 or a 500 Cadillac. If you had to pick, which one would you pick? I don't know why I would be forced to pick one of those because I actually have both of those, so I don't have to pick. I have both of them. But a 500 Cadillac is going to make more torque than the Buick does. They do that because it's almost 50 bigger. So if that's what you want, that works. Sometimes fitting those in different things. If I had like a stage 1 GS, then I would have a Buick in it. I wouldn't have a Cadillac in it. I honestly don't know what I would put the Cadillac in unless I had a sweet Cadillac. Charles, I have a 99 4x4 K35 dually, 6-liter or 40. Well, you got to watch the video. You can see, you get to pick. Occasionally pull heavy items. I currently went back with a big block, but was curious. What coil packs you recommend for coil near plug stuff? I've never run coil on plug stuff on Hondas. We never did. We always ran. I always ran a distributor. So, Mike, you're building a Mark IV, 488, 9.5 to 1, J pistons, hydraulic roller, 244, 256, 632 lift, 114, Rodex heads, single plane, blow through, 850, twin GT45s. That will work good. I don't know what the compression is, but just make sure you have enough octane. Is there a rule of thumb to follow to select turbo size? You should pick the turbo size for the power output that you want. So if you want to make 750 horsepower, then you pick a GT45. And if you want to make 1,000, you pick a S475. One of the problems with the Cadillac, and the Buick has heads available for it, but the Cadillac really doesn't. I know that Cadco has that stuff, but they're pretty expensive though, and it's not like, you know, Edelbrock and AFR and everybody makes aftermarket heads for them. Yeah, the Cadillac is my fallback plan. Somebody was telling me that the Cadillac is going to be would be very hard to put in the Nova. Joe, I have a 30 over 429 Super Cobra jet that has been rebuilt, forged pistons, comp cams, extreme energy, 4x4 camshaft, valve springs, ARP, studs, double roller timing chain. I'll let you borrow it. I need something. What I want to run is something that is stock. So I want to build a replica of the 429 Super Cobra jet motor with stock compression. 30 over would be okay, because especially since that thing is from 1970 or something. 30 over would be fine. It needs to have a stock solid flat tappet cam. The heads, I would like the heads not to be ported and have stock valve sizes. I want to run the factory intake manifold. Factory carburetor is not a deal killer, because we could put something on there. Stock exhaust manifolds would be ideal, so that we could compare that and then put headers on it. You know, it's pretty easy to put together. I think that thing was like 11 to 1 or something. That would be awesome. But if we could put something together, that would be fantastic. Test the GM 60-degree V6. They're better than the supercharged 3800. The Cadillac engines are pretty light, but you got to do some things to get them to run, though. Dune West, yes on your single plane question for those. Can you do BMW engines? I would like to. Yes, and the 455 Olds and Pontiac motors were the jet boat motors. For some reason, they were like the de facto deal. Everyone I saw had those motors in them. Turbo or blower 5.7 Hemi. Yeah, and the turbo will make more power at any given boost level. I have 130,000 original miles on the timing chain. It's an interference engine. Do I need to get? Does it have a lot of slack in it? If it has a lot of slack in it, then you should replace it. I don't have a bell housing for the BMW or an adapter, but do they make? Does anybody make a BMW to GM adapter? Mike, twin GT45s will do way more than 1,000. Would you recommend an LSX 454 to make a 1,400 horsepower reliable? I don't know what block they're using on that. Is it the Iron LSX block that they're using on that? 1,400 horsepower. If you're using it a lot, guys can go out and make runs at 1,000 plus on a stock block, but I mean, I don't know how often you're in it. I understand LS1s are pretty restricted in upping cubic inches. Do people ever sleeve them? Yeah, all the time. We sleeved a lot of the blocks, and we were making on the tall deck RHS block, you can go over 500 inches. On some of the sleeve stuff, we were making 460, 470 inch motors. The 632 from GM is awesome. I will probably not get my hands on one that's way out of my price range. 455 O's in your front wheel drive motorhome. Nice. That's a very other guy's kind of thing. So you're balancing your chamber sizes in the D16 head. Do a Big Bang 2UZ. Those are good. Michael, I don't know if that GM, if that bell housing, if the back of it actually bolts to our pattern, like to the, will that bell housing bolt to a T56 or a T5, or does it have the 4 holes in the back that bolt to our dyno? That's the thing. Bolting it to the engine is easy. That part of the bell housing part is not a problem at all. Maybe you could build the Cadillac for torque and put it in your tow vehicle. I've never tested a Nissan VG30. 460 on an LS1. It wasn't an LS1. This was the one that I did was an LS6, but it's the same deal. We just put Darton sleeves in it. Part of the problem is that the stock sleeve length is not long enough to run lots of stroke. You're limited to about a 4-inch stroke. And then on the LS1, you're limited in bore size also because you can't overbore that block. Some of them you can, like a 6-liter block, you can go 30 over. But when you sleeve them, you can go a lot more. We went 4,185, I think, on ours. And then you can put 4,250 strokes in them. Okay, one more question. I got to get going, guys. Andrew, yours is the last question. Tom, what's going on? I have a stock 6-liter LS and looking at 216, 225. Okay. On a 111. Do you guys think it would be okay with a stock auto trans? The trans is going to be fine. I don't know about the converter in it. That might be okay on a 6-liter. I'm a little worried about the LSA maybe, but Hot mess. Have you flow tested your heads? Where do they flow at 850 lift? Are they still flowing really well? That's going to tell you if you need to do that. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you all for showing up and supporting the channel. The video that I put up today, people seem to like it's doing very well, which is awesome. I like doing those comparisons. I'm working now on stroker versions of the LS versus stroker versions of the 454 and showing what that does to torque, which will be cool. There's already one where we did boost on them to show is boost a substitute for cubic inches. And as you might imagine, especially on the dyno, it certainly is. But as we talked about, I don't know if that's the case for actually doing it out there. If a guy swaps the LS and does a cam and springs and does some sort of aftermarket ECU or does a tune from the file over with Matt, can he actually use that for towing? I think that's an interesting deal because it's not just about power. Thanks, guys, for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.